Hello everyone, this is my Soap Club submission. This is the first of my 2 attempts. This entered the bonus category, and my other attempt is in a separate video. So I used 2 darker, colder colours, green and black mica here. And then for my second pouring pot, I used brighter colours, which was the pink neon colour and the yellow in neon as well. These were from Soak Rochford and they work really nicely in my mix. So here I've got my melted oils and I've put my lye solution in. I am using the stick blender, but I use it really sporadically to make sure that my mix doesn't go to a thicker trace too quickly. I try and keep it really light here because obviously I need to mix in all my colours still and my fragrance oil and have time for all the pouring before my mix thickens up too quickly and doesn't come up with a nice thin feathery design. Once I'm happy with my thin trace here, I'm dividing the whole mix up into individual containers to then add the individual colours. At this point, I'm not adding the fragrance oil. I've tested it beforehand and it really shouldn't accelerate my trace, but at the same time, I want to just keep it to the end just to be on the safe side. Here I'm starting with the titanium dioxide, so I've got a little part of white that I want to be mixing in between the green and black so that the colours are more distinctive here. As you saw, I just used that tiny mixer. That was really to help any smaller colour spots to come out and not leave little lumps in my finished product. Here you can see it looks quite nice. I'm moving on to the next colour. In this case here, I've used the neon yellow. I'm hand blending it in. Thinking that should probably be enough and give a nice vibrant yellow colour, and as you can see it really blends in quite nicely. Then moving on to the pink, same procedure, just adding that powder, mixing in really well just with a hand mixer. I was really quite cautious, trying to keep my trace as thin as possible. I then added the green mica, but as you can see it kind of turned into very dark green, and for my liking it was too dark, it was too close to the black, so I simply added a little bit of my titanium dioxide, stirred again, and you can see it's a lovely green colour now. It's very similar to the black, so I was very glad I chose the white to go in between those 2 colours. And finally here's the black. I did think about using charcoal, but for this one I decided black mica might be a nicer option, and actually it worked really nicely. Now I've got my colours separated here. You can see there's just a smaller amount of the white, the titanium dioxide. Then we've got the neon yellow, which is such a lovely, strong, bright colour. Same with the pink, the neon pink. Look at that bright colour, that's lovely. Then the green, that was the one that I lightened up slightly with the titanium dioxide. And finally the black. So here are my 5 different colours, 5 different containers. My fragrance oil is the lemon curd fragrance from Oasis Oils, and it was lovely. Everything was a nice trace, so I made a decision to stick blend a little bit more. I was just a little bit concerned that possibly I've got some colour spots left, so I went through all the individual pots quickly, gave them a little bit more of a stir with the stick blender to just make sure that all colour is blended in really well. Once I was happy that my colours had been nicely blended into my mix, it was then time to add them to my 2 main containers. Remember, the one side was going to be my colder, darker colours, white, black and the green, and the other one, the yellow and pink. Now I'm pouring really carefully from the front of my beaker here, pouring slowly to make sure that my colours don't mix into one another, but add as lovely individual kind of layers and give that pattern that, in this case, pink, yellow, pink, yellow, pink, yellow. This works really nicely here. I'd obviously at this stage also added the fragrance oil, and I'm taking it in turns, always trying to make sure I roughly add the same amount of pink, followed by yellow, followed by pink, and taking it in turn. My mix at this point isn't quite as runny anymore. It still works nicely, it still flows in, but I need to help a little bit get it out of the container. So this was the last bit of pink, followed by the remainder of the yellow. This seems a little bit more fluid at this point. And finally, for the actual technique, I've got my slab mold here. I've got my 2 containers, the pink yellow on your left and the green, white and black on the right. I'm pouring into the slab mold that I had made a little bit smaller just so I don't have such a massive big shape in the end. I wanted to make sure it goes up higher more. Now if you look at the colours that come into the slab mold, that's just such a lovely, beautiful mix. It is really hard to try and remember to keep the two containers pouring at the same time, at the same speed. And you can see I'm now twisting the containers a little bit. I thought rather than going round the slab mold, I might just twist my containers to create slightly twirling patterns within my actual patterns. And I think that worked really nicely. Now I'm slowly coming to the end of the pour. There is some colour left in each of the containers, but the more they close up, the harder it gets to keep the colours mixing in together. It still works fine. I do wonder what happens to that centre part here, how many different patterns I will get in there, but there's only one way to find out right at the end. And we have been told that that right centre part, the one that kind of looks like a little bit lumpy now, we are allowed to use a little twirly stick and just help that pattern right in the center, only in the center. And I'm doing that here. In terms of the design, I'm really quite excited to see what it looks like when I cut the soap, and in particular, once I plane it. So when I take that top layer off and see what exactly is hidden underneath that surface. I'm just wriggling this around a little bit just to get rid of any possible air pockets in this mix, and then I'm going to have to leave it overnight to let it dry. Because I don't usually work with a slab mold when making soaps, I don't have all the additional extra fancy tools that some people have, such as the dividers, which mean you don't need to cut your soap in the end yourself, but I've measured them all carefully, so hopefully all these soap bars will end up in the same size. Now this is the dried soap. You can see the inside a little bit. It's not planed at all, so we shall see in a minute what it reveals. Let's have a quick look at one of the soap bars once it's cut before it's planed. So I'm cutting the last two pieces here apart. Again, I've measured them all out, and here you can see what it looks like. There is some lovely mixing of colors going on, beautiful contrasts. I'm actually quite happy with this, and now I just need to plane them quickly. And here they all are, the finished bars of soap. You can see the red is really vibrant. That's a really good color to use if you're looking for a vibrant color, as is the yellow. The green has come out beautifully as well. I think my only one that I think I would change the next time would be making sure that either my titanium dioxide is fully dissolved before I start, or otherwise maybe use a white mica or use any other colorant to make it brighter. That's the one thing, that the detail that's kind of bothering me a little bit, is that you have got some white color spots in there. And also I used the stick blender again. If you recall, I started with a stick blender just briefly because I was a bit concerned about getting a trace that's medium or just not fluid enough to come up with that really lovely design. Then I went with a hand blender and it was all fine. And then I got a little concerned about the color spots, so I used a stick blender again. And I think if I had left that stick blender, I would have ended up with those really thin, feathery lines. So with this particular attempt, I don't have the very thin, feathery lines, although there's some really lovely detail in there. So if I had wanted to have some more feathers, I should have probably avoided that second lot of stick blending. But actually, the soap as it is, I think is pretty stunning. And if you look at those three soap bars that I have lined up in the one image, the middle one, if you look up the Scream, the painting, actually there is a lot of resemblance. So I'm actually quite happy with that. So all in all, I think that was a pretty good first attempt. But for my second attempt, I did avoid the second time round, or just in general, too much stick blending. And you can see, if you have a look at that video, what difference that made in terms of results.